um, funny, cool a forum that I go to, and it's called Fat Fire. You know what FIRE is? Like FIRE is like financially independent, retired early. And typically FIRE is like people who want to save like $1 million and live off like 50,000 a year. Fat FIRE is people who want to like earn a huge, a much larger amount and live somewhat lavishly. And on that subreddit, the number is like 3%. So it's a little bit higher than 2%, but like 3%. I think there was this thing called the Trinity study, and they said like 4%. Frankly, I think that sometimes is too high. But like I kind of buy in the 3% range. And anyway, there's this one book. Have you ever heard of this guy named Felix Dennis?
No, I don't think so.
He's amazing. He's dead now, but he's kind of like a combination of Mick Jagger and Richard Branson. So he was this British entrepreneur, and he was kind of flamboyant like Richard Branson and like did a bunch of stuff, but he was like Mick Jagger in that he was like kind of a degenerate, like he loved drugs and hookers, and he wrote about like his escapades when he got older. He was like, I had a drug problem and I was never married, so I was just like sleeping around. And so he's kind of like a fun guy to read about, but he's got this book called How to Get Rich. It's kind of poorly titled in a way that it's like embarrassing to talk about, but it's quite a good book. And he was like, he eventually founded Micro Warehouse, which was a publicly traded company, but he also started Maxim magazine. He was a publisher, so he made all of his money in magazines. And he was like, so I'm going to die soon because I've got cancer, and I'll die with like a $600 million net worth. But if I could do it all over again, my goal would have been to make $20 or $30 million by the age of 35 and not focus on money making ever again and only focus on like the people I cared about. But like a boxer who's punch drunk, I went back into the ring every time because I was addicted to it, even though it didn't always bring me the most amount of fulfillment and happiness.
I just want to share 3 reactions to that. The first is there was a band leader from the late 60s or early 70s who was being interviewed a few years ago, and the announcer said, you were the first band to make $1 million a month. No band had ever made that much money. What'd you do with all that money? You guys must be rich. He said, well, we spent about 70% on wine, women, and drugs and wasted all the rest. But the thing with Mick Jagger is what you don't see is he like works out 6 hours a day. Sure. He eats a food regimen that's like second to none. And here's a guy who's
maybe Keith was a better example.
Yeah, well, that's important because even with Richard Branson, with his whatever your persona is, he knows how to lever from a marketing point of view. He puts like nothing into a business, and others invest around his name, so his risk is very low. These are people who are real geniuses at what they do. But the thing that you didn't mention is philanthropy. Like, how does people create meaning? I think that people who've created a certain amount of wealth and then say a higher percentage of what I'm going to make, I'm going to give back to causes that I believe in and try and make the world a better place. I think that's a really important way to get meaning. So that guy who made 600 and said I should have just made 30, maybe he should have just been a little more philanthropic and looked around the world and said, I can make an impact in a positive way.
Have you heard of this book called, you got a ton of books behind you, so maybe you have, it looks like you read a lot. There's this book called Dying with Zero. It's by this hedge fund guy named Bill Perkins, and I've just started reading it, but it sounds like the premise of the book is basically like, spend, like if you're going to give, instead of giving away money when you're dead, like give your kids the money now. So if they want to buy a home or do something, like maybe you can enjoy it together. If you want to leave money to a certain cause, just give it now because you'll be able to see it and you can all get a little more joy out of that.
Sure. That was the biggest debate. For many years, Warren Buffett said, I'm leaving a big foundation when I die. And he said, because I'm growing my capital so quickly that by leaving it in my portfolio, I'll leave so much more. And Bill Gates made the argument with him, yes, but what's the value of a life saved today versus a life only saved 30 years from now when you die? And some things aren't financial calculations. So the point that you're making is there's a lot of value to being philanthropic, both with your time and your money, earlier on and not just later on. And I think one of the things that is really important is many entrepreneurs have a lot more than money. They have skills and insights and contacts that they can lever philanthropically. So I do believe in being as active as possible to make climate is my number one issue. And so I'm involved in climate, both politically, philanthropically, and in the way I invest. And that's given me a lot of feeling, at least, of I'm doing as much as I can.
Good.